What do you do when the walls of your childhood home whisper secrets of espionage and betrayal, challenging everything you thought you knew about your family's legacy? As the knock echoed through the hollow bones of my childhood home, a cold sweat broke over me, chilling even the warmth of the dawn sunlight that had just begun to filter through the attic's grime-covered windowpanes. My heart raced, not merely from the startled interruption, but from the sheer gravity of what I had uncovered. The air hung thick with secrets, whispers of betrayal, espionage, and lives entwined in a dangerous dance around the looming shadows of World War II. I hastily shoved the box back into its dusty corner, marking my territory with an instinct born out of fear and defiance. My sanctuary now felt compromised, and the thought of strangers digging through my personal history with the audacity of scavengers twisted a knot in my stomach. Who was this historian really? And what vested interest did he have in unearthing my family's past? Richard Pine's presence on my doorstep did little to alleviate my unease. His polished shoes clicked against my wooden floor with percussive authority, and his carefully arranged features bore a smug look that seldom spelled good news. "Maggie, you really should consider letting me take the lead on this," he insisted, his voice oozing false congeniality, masking the underlying threat. I could feel his eyes, blue and piercing, skimming over my worn-out sweater and frayed jeans, silently judging. How dare he try to sweep this revelation under the rug? My chest tightened with indignation. It wasn't just the discovery of a dark past, but the audacity of this man to belittle me, to assume that I would bow to his whims. "This is my family's history too, Richard. You don't get to dictate how I handle it." I shot back, my voice trembling but resolute. Lucas would arrive soon, but until then, I was trapped in a verbal boxing ring with Richard. I could feel the enormity of the hidden documents pushing me to my limits, awakening a previously subdued fighter within me. I had always been timid, almost invisible during confrontations, but now the flames of righteousness ignited a flicker of defiance. "You can't just come in here acting like you own this place. Those people were heroes." His smirk faltered momentarily, and that flicker of uncertainty fueled my resolve. "What you call intrigue, I call treachery," he replied casually, dismissing the very fighting spirit of my ancestors, as if they had never put their lives on the line for a cause greater than themselves. With every syllable, my disgust deepened, intertwining with the need to uncover the entire truth. When Lucas finally burst through the front door, his energy pulsed through me like a lifeline. "What's happening? I texted you," and it sounded urgent. Despite my linings of stress, a wave of relief washed over me. He was a calming constant in this explosive storm. I quickly recounted the discovery and Richard's unwelcome advance as Lucas's brow furrowed, a telltale sign of his mounting concern. He wasn't just my friend. He was my ally, a guardian of my sanity against this world of deceit. "Maggie, you can't let him intimidate you," Lucas urged, casting a sidelong glance toward Richard, who leaned casually against the kitchen island, oozing disdain. "It's your home, your legacy. We can fight this together." I nodded, emboldened by his support. Together, we could unravel this tangled web of treachery that had ensnared my family for far too long. With no intention of ceding ground, I appealed to Richard. "If you think I'm simply going to hand over these documents to you, and whatever convoluted agenda you might have, you're gravely mistaken." His laughter echoed mockingly, a chilling sound that tapped into the fears festering just beneath my skin. "You should know, the world doesn't take kindly to revelations of this nature. You might want to check yourself before you embark on this dire quest, dear Maggie." His insinuations lay heavy on my mind, as if he had planted seeds of doubt, and for a second I felt the weight of the hidden past pressing down on my shoulders. But then I remembered the intensity of those papers, the hints of bravery hidden within betrayal, the sharp lines snaking across fragile pages, and the void that had long been filled with silence. Everything hesitated at that moment. The air, the ground beneath my feet, even the bonds of friendship that had tethered me safely to reality. But amidst the turmoil, I felt determination swell from the core of my being. I could not, would not be silenced. The weight of my family history lay like lead in my stomach, a constant reminder of the duty that now bore itself upon me. Armed with the knowledge that truth always triumphs amid darkness, I exchanged a steely glance with Lucas. Our unspoken agreement solidified in the intensity of the moment. "Let's dig deeper," I whispered, determination lacing my voice. "Let's find out what really happened under this roof." With that, I faced Richard once more, the tension electric between us, ready to shatter the facade of torpid respectability he tried to maintain. Would he finally recognize the unyielding force of justice aiming to obliterate his manipulative grasp on the past? Together, we would unveil the tangled threads of history and confront the truth that had haunted this aged house for too long. Would Richard learn that some histories refuse to be buried? With a resolute breath, I turned my back on Richard, knowing full well that my forthcoming confrontation would eclipse whatever hollow victory he believed he had achieved in this moment. The attic, now more than a mere space, had transformed into a battleground, one filled with specter-like remnants of my ancestors, whose lives had been swallowed by secrecy and betrayal. Lucas followed without hesitation, the weighty box of documents clutched in my arms like a shield, representing not just my family history, but the very essence of defiance. Every creak of the wooden floor beneath us seemed to echo the past, each sound whispering reminders of struggles fought and truths cloaked in the gauze of time. I felt the oppressive atmosphere tighten around me as I began to sift through the contents, my heart racing with anticipation and fear. The documents I uncovered lay strewn across my childhood desk, their pages yellowed and brittle, yet laden with stories begging to be told. Time-faded ink, irregularly scrawled notes, and indistinct photographs painted a narrative I was only beginning to grasp. Each meticulous detail chipped away at the walls of my ignorance, filling my heart with pangs of disbelief, my ancestors intertwined in a world hidden beneath the mundane normalcy of our lives. As I flicked through the files, a chilling realization gripped me. The very same house I had called home had stood as a mere facade for a safe house during the most tumultuous time in history. The specter of espionage echoed loudly in every corner of the room where I had once felt safe. I could hardly breathe beneath the weight of revelations. Who had known, especially Richard, with his predilection for manipulating others? "Did you see this?" Lucas exclaimed, his finger hovering over a photograph. It depicted a group of men dressed in tailored suits mingling amidst shadows. Their expressions, a mixture of camaraderie and fear, unraveled the stories rarely spoken. These are not just faces, they're links to a history filled with stakes far higher than we imagined. The urgency in his voice snapped me from my reverie, igniting an ember of fury within me. How dare Richard try to commandeer this legacy? History was a rugged battleground, where we fought to reveal the unvarnished truth, not one to be selective about what should be remembered or forgotten. I could feel the pulse of empowerment thrumming in my veins, an echo of all those who had stood bravely in defiance before faceless threats, bolstering my resolve as the stakes sharpened. No longer could I allow Richard's brand of institutional intimidation to shadow our efforts. I turned back to the box, combing through files rapidly with clarity. These men were agents. They risked everything to topple an evil regime. This legacy deserves to be honored, not buried because it might tarnish some upper-crust image. My voice crackled with raw intensity. A demand for justice echoed in every syllable. Richard's attempt to placate me was futile. He didn't realize that coercion only stoked the flames of my outrage further, feeding my determination to unearth the truth. They sacrificed their lives, and I deserved to know why my family hid it all for so long. You can strut around here like you own this place, but I refuse to let you rewrite my truth. The thought of paranoid whispers trailing behind me, of fear-drenched phone calls that threatened to unearth nightmares, revved a defiance I didn't know I possessed. I recalled the curator's voice on the other end of the phone, the way he had warned me against pursuing the truth. "You're overstepping, Miss Thompson. I suggest you tread lightly." But I would not cower. I would not circumscribe my urge to expose this history shackled under veils of propriety. I was the custodian of my family's past, not Richard Pine, not any historian with sinister motives. The cliché that truth is the first casualty of war echoed in the recesses of my mind, igniting a fire that surged through my bones. We have to take this to social media, to the press. Spread the truth far and wide, I announced, envisioning the world waking up to echoes of bravery, intertwined lives, and a narrative worth fighting for. As I contemplated the wider implications of my choices, I could sense Lucas buzzing with unfiltered electricity at the thought of seeking justice. "You mean it? Print this?" "But Maggie, it could get ugly. Flaring tensions readily lead to danger." Despite the edge of concern in his voice, I found comfort in his unwavering support. I gave him a determined nod, buoyed by the conviction within me. Even if the journals of my ancestors hinted at treacherous decisions, I owed it to them to bring their story forward into the light. Let's build a narrative that lays bare our history. Let's confront Richard and those like him who think they can hide behind respectability while polishing their reputations on the remains of others. In my mind, the culmination felt inevitable. The fight against Richard was no mere spat over documents but a larger battle against historical amnesia, against the suppression of legacies that demanded acknowledgement. The pulse of revolt began to quicken as I envisioned the press conference, the stillness culminating into questions asked, truths exposed, and a history reclaimed. What began as an individual crisis morphed into a collective uprising, a tapestry woven from whispers of bravery merging into deliberate loud refusals, demanding recognition for all that had been sacrificed, all that remained untouched. The gravity of what lay ahead sharpened my focus. Though shadows lingered, I would not succumb. I would confront my home of storied betrayal, rise fiercely against Richard's looming threat, and carve a legacy anew from facts once buried deep. Would this house of secrets finally yield its truths? Or would it continue to be a shadow of a past cloaked in silence? With a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressed down on me as I stood across from Lucas, his laptop glowing brightly, reflecting the fire in my eyes. The intermingling of our determination became almost palpable in the room filled with age-old secrets waiting to burst forth. Each keystroke rippled with urgency, as if we were conjuring a magnet against the silence that had accepted Richard's self-serving narrative for far too long. I know we've touched on their network of spies, but we need more than just whispers in the archives. We need actual proof. Photos, documents, letters, anything that proves they were actively involved. My words came out in a rush, the intoxicating thrill of uncovering the truth igniting the air between us. The stakes were no longer just my history. They had expanded into the realm of justice, demanding every ounce of my relentless pursuit. "Okay," Lucas replied, nodding thoughtfully as he peeled away at search engines, documentary databases, and historical forums that could hold the key to unlocking our past. "Let's dig into city records, online archives. They might be boring, but sometimes they hide the gems we need." His fingers flew across the keyboard, typing furiously as I gathered the scattered pages and photographs from the box beside us, brilliant with distorted images of those who were once so utterly alive. I pressed them against the desk, as if my touch could awaken the history captured within each frame, grounding me amid a storm of suspicions and revelations. I refused to let Richard's arrogant pretensions hold any influence on this pursuit. Empowered, I felt the historical weight of my family's legacy breathing fiercely alongside me. The shadows outside grew longer, stretching into eerie tendrils that seemed to claw at the very edges of my resolve. I could feel Richard's threat lurking in the backdrop, the drilling reminder of his warning when he said, "Just be careful what you share, Maggie." The condescension in his tone lingered like a bad aftertaste, souring my stomach against the very thought of his character. How could someone so blind to the very essence of humanity expect to dictate justice? I would expose his hypocrisy, strip away the layers of pompous triumph he draped over his shoulders like a regal cloak. Behind that facade lay a man who trivialized lives sacrificed in the fight against tyranny, who aided the cover-up of invaluable histories. My rage simmered forth, solidifying into something undeniably fierce, the kind that could spark change and force old wounds to bleed openly. "Found something," Lucas erupted, exuding a spark I desperately needed. His eyes shone with newfound anticipation as he rotated the laptop toward me, displaying digitized documents covered with official seals and signatures. "Look at this. Meeting notes from an underground assembly in the late 40s. This was right after the war. These are records of the very men who operated from our house. Some of their names are even listed here alongside their covert operations." My breath hitched, the air filling with a potent mix of dread and exultation. Would it be enough to counter Richard's intimidation? The powers he may hold in this small community couldn't overshadow the truths scrambling to expose themselves through history's fissures. Undeterred, I remained steadfast in my pursuit, my heart pounding with both excitement and fear as the urgency morphed into oppressive energy. The implications of our findings were monumental, the echoes of the past rumbling beneath our feet like tectonic plates shifting in anticipation of upheaval. I envisioned Richard's smug demeanor crumbling under the weight of truths exposed, his entitlement shrinking into a mere whisper as countless lives stood tall in defiance against oppression and silence. We can't let this fester in obscurity. There's too much at stake. My voice felt emboldened, ringing like a clarion call as I continued to process the gravity of what we had unearthed, burning with my ancestors' fervor, unwilling to let their sacrifices lie in obscurity anymore. Let's do this the right way. Set up a press release and rally support. Lucas chimed in, his determination matching mine. We can't just post it online. Let's engage with the local historians, the press. This isn't just about us. There'll be people interested in this story, people who can help amplify our message. As ideas flowed, a vision materialized in our shared enthusiasm, a gathering of voices unified in honor of those lost, and a confrontation of the silence surrounding them. As visions of press conferences and social media campaigns played through my mind, anticipation coursed through my veins, illuminating a resonance of bravery refusing to yield. The fervor to reclaim this legacy turned into something electric. Our ancestors' stories demanded to be told, and we would bring them to life. We spent countless hours preparing, meticulously drafting our statements, retracing our steps through historical records, and even interviewing those who had believed in the forgotten tales of the resistance. This could become something bigger than ourselves. It could ignite a fire within the community, provoke discussions about the ethics of preserving history versus the power of influence wielded by those like Richard. Each word infused with the weight of justice transformed our venture into a rallying cry, not just for my family, but for every invisible struggle lost to the past. As I glanced at Lucas, I found his eyes ablaze. This was more than just a personal fight. It was a movement, a transformation igniting the very ground beneath our feet. Yet, as we took the final steps in preparing our public announcement, dread fought against my determination. How would Richard retaliate? His silently orchestrated attempts to silence us echoed as dark thoughts crept in, taunting my courage. The echoes of a time long past, now sharper and tinged with anticipation, fueled my resolve. Were we ready to face the consequences? Would our revelations bring justice? Or were we simply baiting a lion, inviting its wrath only to leave ourselves stripped bare and vulnerable? With a mixture of righteousness and fear coursing through me, I clenched my fists, reminding myself of every ancestor who had fought valiantly. The time for reckoning had come. Could we rise against oppression, or would we be swallowed by the shadows of the past? With each passing hour, the tension in the air became a palpable force, wrapping around me like a thick fog that blurred the edges of my resolve. Lucas and I dove deeper into our preparations, hammering out phrases that would pierce through the silence Richard and his ilk had so long maintained. I could hardly remember the last time I felt such urgency. The clock ticked furiously, seemingly mocking our every moment spent staving off the inevitable confrontation. Every ding of an email notification sent spikes of adrenaline through my body, the anticipation of a breakthrough mingling dangerously with the dread of the fallout that could ensue. What bombshell would shatter Richard's facade? What justice awaited our ancestry, dismantled like a fortress built on lies? My heart raced, rushing toward an unknown filled with both trepidation and fierce hope. The days dwindled quickly, each sunrise laden with additional purpose, but also reflective of the stakes rising to dizzying heights. I gathered the community under the roof that had sheltered spies, a bittersweet reminder of the past, now reimagined as a sanctuary for the truth. Our basement became a makeshift war room, characterized by clinking coffee mugs, whispered strategies, and the fire of righteous fury that swirled around us. I saw faces carved with worry, but also determination, people whose ancestors had lingered in darkness, unwilling to have their stories overlooked again. Every tearful recounting of lost loved ones or whispered stories about neighbors who dared to resist, illuminated the strength of our shared history. As our collective voice began to build, I felt the shadows lifting, just enough that we might glimpse the dawn of reckoning on the horizon. But not everyone shared our vision. Whispers of skepticism slithered through the gathering, poisoning anticipation with doubts. Were we, after all, just dreaming in vain? Beneath Richard's cloud of influence, others were all too eager to dismiss us. "This is risky, Maggie," one voice murmured, echoing the worried stares of some hesitant participants. Yet, my determination hardened, and I embraced the outrage simmering within me. "Risk is the price of truth," I asserted, locking eyes with my fellow warriors. "We cannot continue living in the shadows cast by one man's entitlement. The lives of those who stood strong against oppression demand recognition. We owe it to them." The exclamation fell like a hammer, breaking the tension, igniting a chorus of agreement amidst muffled nods. This was no longer just my fight, it was our shared battle. As we prepared for our first press conference, a deep unease twisted my stomach into knots of uncertainty. Each public statement felt like a leap into an abyss, where success or failure hung solely on our ability to convey the truth. Standing before makeup artists who fluffed my hair and smoothed my blazer made me feel like a puppet in a ghastly play. Yet the weight of those staring back at me offered a flicker of unwavering faith. I flexed my hands into fists, drawing strength from the memories of countless sacrifices made in pursuit of justice. The light dimmed in my stomach, twisting, until a single thought surged through the darkness. I would channel every ounce of my rage into this moment, shedding the paltry shackles of fear that sought to immobilize me. Time became an unrelenting adversary. On the day of the press conference, I stood backstage, trembling at the backdrop of a well-lit podium flickering ominously, amplified by the whirring of cameras ready to capture every moment. Lucas stood beside me, a silent guardian bolstering my fluctuating resolve. "Remember," he whispered, "you are speaking for all those who have been silenced, for the shadows lurking behind Richard's lie." The immediacy of his words surged through me. It wasn't just about feeble whispers, but roars of defiance against deceit. I stepped forward, my breath hitching, heart racing like a wild horse, prepared to release the tempest of truths that had long been marginalized and hidden away. The moment I stepped into the glare of the spotlight, flashes popped like gunfire, and reporters jostled to frame my image. But I squared my shoulders, embracing the anxious energy coursing through me. I opened my mouth, breath trembling with anticipation. "Good evening," I began, and a sudden hush swept over the crowd, a stillness that felt almost holy. "Today I am here to unveil a history cloaked in silence and entangled in deceit. Our home, a safe house for spies during World War II, has borne witness to incidents of unspeakable bravery and betrayal." With every word I spoke, I saw Richard's face twist, the facade of superiority cracking under the weight of accountability. This was his moment, yet it was mine too, an irrefutable challenge set against his arrogance, woven in familiar threads of injustice. As I unveiled the documents mentioned in hushed tones over the days leading up to this moment, an electric tension settled in the air, crackling like the impending storm outside that gathered its strength just as our truths were easing into the world. These records expose a network, an intricate web of subterfuge that occupied our very homes, allowing a monster to thrive while ordinary men and women laid their lives on the line to resist them. I locked eyes with the inexplicably human faces staring back, feeding off their growing inspiration and outrage as I compelled them to see the richness of their own histories as we rallied together. We have one chance to reclaim our story, and with that, we reclaim our power. With my heart pounding in my chest, I visualized each nod, each hand raised in solidarity, blending into a resounding chorus of resistance, an entire community rallying to reclaim ancestral narratives once buried beneath pompous shrouds of entitlement. As the heat of exhilaration radiated through me, I finally understood. This was our moment. We would unravel Richard's twisted legacy. Would it be enough to challenge the dreams that inspired us? Were we truly prepared for the backlash that would inevitably follow? Only time would tell, but for the first time, I felt truly alive, emboldened, prepared to ignite change with the fire of truth. Would it all come crashing down, Or would we rise victorious to banish the shadows forever? I opened my mouth, my voice a fragile whisper lost in the cacophony of the world beyond the stage. The ocean of faces before me shifted and swayed like a charged crowd, lapping at the shores of my resolve, drawing out every fiber of my determination. Richard was there, a formidable storm behind the cameras, the epitome of privilege standing tall, radiating icy contempt that threatened to engulf me. But I was not about to drown in his waves of disapproval. As I clasped my hands tightly together, the pages of the newly uncovered documents crackled with hidden truths, waiting to explode into the light. Each word I had meticulously crafted now clung to my throat, yearning to break free, to unfurl the relentless story that begged to be told. Would they hear me? Would they believe this incredible twist in the fabric of their existence? The palpable tension weighed upon me, yet deep within, the flames of defiance flickered unexpectedly, igniting the courage I needed to carry this burden forward. The air buzzed with anticipation as, channeling my anxiety into a wave of fervent energy, I pressed on with momentum and clarity. We stand here today, not just as witnesses to a newfound history, but as custodians of our own narratives, I proclaimed, my words gaining strength with each beat of my heart. The room responded, each head nodding in silent solidarity, eyes shimmering with empathy and the dawning understanding of a shared past. The more I unspooled the sordid threads of deception woven by the likes of Richard, the more emboldened I became. Ties to Nazi operatives, the ease with which an entire network flourished beneath the surface of our quaint neighborhood. My voice rang out, relentless and vibrant, as I painted the visceral realities of their silence. Those who fought in shadows, those who resisted tyranny, cannot remain unidentified. This was not just history, it was a sacred obligation. But as I launched into the revelations of our findings, I could feel Richard's disapproval coalescing behind me like an impending storm cloud. I caught glimpses of his sharp blue eyes slicing through the crowd, attempting to mentally dismantle the grounds of my truth. My breath quickened, but I refused to fall back beneath his weight. Instead, I leaned into the crowd, inviting the warmth of their support to bolster my failing courage. I could almost hear the whispers that would doubt my narrative, the insidious voices that urged me to question whether this fight was worth the risk. But my mind churned in defiance. He seeks to uphold a narrative rooted in silence and entitlement, I shouted, venting the frustration that had bubbled within. I will not bow to that legacy, nor allow it to overshadow our collective quest for truth. Each assertion became a rallying cry that propelled the air around us into a vortex of palpable energy. Just as the room ignited with my fervor, the historian stepped forth, flair and bravado wrapped around him like a cloak of smoke. Richard followed suit, his presence expanding in the room, a serpent coiling around the very pillars of our determination. The historian's voice, dripping with condescension, attempted to bury me beneath a velvet blanket of scoff. Maggie, my dear, history is nuanced, full of complexities you cannot possibly fathom. The collective intake of breath in the room drowned out his words, leaving behind a pulse of outrage echoing against the walls. I could feel every pair of eyes focusing back on me as I retorted. Nuances? You mean lies and unchecked privilege? You believe that rhetoric can crush our stories? The stories of sacrificed lives deserve more than to be dulled beneath your entitlement? I was tearing through his machinations, each syllable a strike against the monstrous facade, firming my grasp on this pivotal moment. The tension flickered like electricity in the air, palpable and crackling with newfound courage. I focused on the ghosts of the past, those brave souls who had sacrificed too much to remain hidden. This is not just my fight. My declaration swelled as I gestured towards the gathered community, those who had powered this truth and borne witness to their own family struggles against the tide of oppression. This is our chance, our responsibility, to weave their narratives back into the fabric of history. Those whose struggles have been fetishized and erased deserve the valor of recognition. If we allow ourselves to be dictated by the past we've uncovered, what will future generations say about us? Will they condemn us for our complacency, or will they honor our fight for their stories? I let the weight of that question settle over the room, allowing our shared purpose to resonate among us. But Richard's smirk remained unfaltering. A malevolent knot of arrogance coiled at the back of his throat, silently scheming, plotting how he would maneuver his way out. Yet today, I, Maggie Thompson, was no longer fragile. I would not tolerate his disregard for the lives that had forged a path of resistance despite their fear. The crowd swayed, willing to join in this resistance, our voices woven into an unrelenting anthem against the past. And as the press scrutinized my every move, each flash of light illuminating the flickering resolve in the room, I let the rising tide of unity wash over me. Together, we could drive these repressed stories back into the light where they belonged. We could force the world to see what lurked beneath the well-manicured turf of entitlement and deception. Could Richard withstand the truth we unleashed? Or was the power of our collective grief and outrage enough to quench his legacy of lies? In that charged atmosphere, as I prepared to conclude, I summoned the strength I drew from every voice aggrieved by silence, the anguish unspooled into the air like smoke rising from a candle flickering against the darkness. Together, we will uncloak the abyss that has mourned for recognition. I finished, the thunderous applause reverberating against the walls, pushing me into a spiraling moment of euphoric defiance. Outside, the clouds churned uneasily, flashing with the promise of storm, reflecting the chaos unfurling within our history as we stepped boldly into this new dawn, one where truth could no longer be silenced. Would the weight of our determination be enough to challenge the looming shadows that had long held sway over us? Would we, against all odds, rise to claim our rightful destiny? As the applause echoed in the town hall, a rush of adrenaline washed over me, yet it was laced with an undercurrent of dread. The confrontation had shattered the silence that had cloaked our neighborhood, igniting a firestorm that I wasn't certain I could control. Faces of my neighbors glimmered with unshed tears and buried memories, stories I had called upon to unify us, but I had unwittingly summoned something much darker as well. Where light had flickered, shadows danced ominously, and I could feel Richard's calculating presence lingering, a storm gathering strength behind the facade of applause. This was only the beginning. The bureaucrats would not lay down quietly, tarnished by the truths I had just unveiled. The days following the town hall meeting unfolded like a fever dream. Amidst the chaos, I became an unsolicited local celebrity, thrust into the limelight I had never sought. The press clamored for interviews, and my phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from community members sharing their own discoveries about their home's hidden ties to that grotesque past. Lucas was my rock, steadfast and unwavering, dissecting the reams of documents while peppering me with encouraging words. Together, we pieced together a tapestry woven from the resilience of generations forgotten. But with each revelation, I could feel Richard's malign influence creeping closer. Whispers of threats that would nip at my heels kept me awake at night. The remnants of his privilege lingered like an acrid taste on my tongue. It was the evening of a community meeting when the tension came to a head once again. Our planning session, meant to chart the course for demanding accountability, had morphed into a battlefield, stifled by Richard's calculated attempts to undermine every word I spoke. Even now, in a room filled with concerned faces, neighbors turned allies, I could see the chill of his dismissive gaze clawing at my resolve. "Perhaps," he said, with a drawl so mocking it reverberated across the room, "your discoveries have misled you, Maggie. You're grasping at straws in an old dusty attic." The air thickened as resistance simmered beneath the surface. How dare he belittle the suffering so many had endured? I felt my cheeks flush. An all too familiar blend of rage and vulnerability settled like a sick weight in my chest. "The only straws I'm grasping," I shot back, steeling myself against his onslaught, "are those of people who deserve justice. We won't dismiss their memories for your convenience, Richard." My voice sliced through the quiet murmur of disbelief that rippled through our gathering, igniting an ember of shared anger among my neighbors. I could see them straightening as if each vow to stand together fortified our collective unity. We would not be shadows in our own story, nor pawns in the game he had taken upon himself to manipulate. I had stumbled into this fight, but it was now ours, and I was prepared to shoulder the burden if it meant we could reclaim the truth. As I stood there, fists clenched at my side, something primal surged within me, an unquenchable thirst for justice. I could feel hope bubbling beneath the surface, a defiance that wouldn't be snuffed out by the likes of Richard Pine. Shouting into the remains of his derision became a ritual, an incantation that called forth the anger of our shared history. No longer will fear keep us silent. We will uncover the truth and hold those who perpetuate lies accountable. This isn't just about our homes anymore. This is about honor, about standing against decades of erasure. The echoes of my voice hung in the air. It was an escalating crescendo, and the crowd responded with fervent cheer. This time the applause rang louder, shaking the very foundations of the walls around us, as if the spirits of those past finally realized they were being remembered. But as we left the meeting, buzzed with anticipation, a chill skittered up my spine like fingers tracing my thoughts. Richard would retaliate. He had to. In the realm of the powerful, when faced with the threat of exposure, came the instinct to protect the status quo, by any means necessary. I shared my worries with Lucas, his brow creasing with concern as we navigated through dank alleyways, the world suddenly feeling larger and more suffocating. "What are you thinking?" he urged. "We need to find a way to make Richard questioned, to cut deeper into this," I replied, determination coursing through my veins like wildfire. He nodded, his own fervor awakening the possibilities that lie ahead. A reckoning was brewing, and it became clear. We had to go deeper, embrace the shadows if we wished to draw out the truth. Days bled into a relentless cycle of unease as I returned home each night, the weight of our discoveries pressing like lead on my chest. The thought of Richard's inevitable retaliation lingered like a shadow at my doorstep. I immersed myself in a world of files and whispers, piecing together alliances we had forged along this audacious journey. Each connection strengthened our resolve, unveiling a hidden society that danced on the precipice of darkness, waiting for our resurgence to shine a light on their plight. I was determined not to let fear dictate my actions. I had come too far. Lucas flashed a grin as he ran simulations on his tablet, unraveling digital files hidden within encrypted black markets of history. The ghosts of our past were desperate for their stories to be told, and I would be the vessel through which they emerged. That night, as the wind rattled against the windowpanes, I resolved to uncover every secret Richard had hoped would remain buried. I gathered our neighbors for an emergency meeting, this time brimming with stifled anger, buzzing curiosity, and the irrevocable need for justice. I could already picture Richard's pompous expression as we revealed his collusion with the historian's deceitful narrative. I could feel it erupt like a thunderclap, palpable in the air, inching us closer to the triumphant breakthrough that might finally expose the monster behind the mask. As we huddled together, a fear dissipating with unity weaving its way through each heartbeat, I felt it. The ground beneath us would shift, shake, and ultimately rise against the weight of oppression. Would our combined strength be enough to dismantle the facade of privilege and entitlement that threatened to suffocate our pursuit of truth? The night of the emergency meeting felt electric with charged anticipation, a spark igniting unity among us. Neighbors arrived, some with tears in their eyes, others with clenched fists, each carrying the burden of stories untold, decades wrapped in silence waiting to be unleashed. I wasted no time. Urgency propelled me forward, and I stared into the determined faces before me, my heart hammering against my ribcage like an impatient bird. This was the reckoning we had been waiting for, the moment of transformation. "Tonight," I began, my voice steady, "we take the reins of our narrative. We will expose Richard's lies and reclaim the history that belongs to us all." The roar of agreement that followed sent tremors through me, a promise entwined around our collective ambition. In that room, each person who had stood in the shadows would finally step into the light. As I recounted the findings that Lucas and I had gathered, my words became a rallying cry. Each paper I held seemed to pulse with the emotions trapped within them: betrayal, loss, and an unyielding thirst for truth. "Look at these documents," I urged, splaying them across the table as if they were ancient relics, meant to awaken us from centuries of numbness. They detail everything from the role of our homes as hiding spots for spies to Richard's family's connections with the very Nazi operatives who blighted our community. Gasps punctuated the room, eyes wide in disbelief, hands gripping the edges of the table in collective rage. The walls reverberated with the heavy weight of our shared history, Each name read aloud, a spark igniting buried outrage, leaving no doubt that what we uncovered was more than mere history. It was a grotesque legacy we could no longer accept in silence. Yet, amidst the rising tide of determination, a dark cloud hovered overhead, that relentless specter of Richard. I could almost feel his condescending gaze, watching, judging, eager for weakness. As if sensing my fears, Lucas stepped closer. "Don't let him intimidate you, Maggie. He thrives on our uncertainty. But together, we're stronger," he whispered, conviction lacing his tones. And he was right. I couldn't let Richard's aura of doom shroud our purpose. As our voices wove together into a tapestry of truth, I saw the sparks igniting within my neighbor's eyes, each flame reflecting a newfound defiance against a legacy that sought to keep us silent. With renewed resolve, I proposed a plan: to host a public forum, inviting our entire community along with the press, to expose the truth of our homes and their histories. "Let us stand united in public," I declared, a fire lighting my veins. "Let's shine a spotlight on Richard and the systems that uphold his privilege. We will not allow fear to hold us hostage any longer." The clamor of agreement surged again, faces lighting up with the shared dream of pushing our movement forward. I felt a surge of power rushing through me as neighbors began to brainstorm how to get the word out, who to invite, and how best to present our case. Hope brewed like a storm at the edge of the sea, each wave crashing against the cliffs of oppression as we prepared to unleash our fury and reclaim our histories. Though the date of our forum neared with monstrous speed, unease rattled within my chest like an uninvited guest. What if Richard plotted against us? What powers might he wield to snuff out our voices before they could even take flight? "I can handle him," Lucas reassured me, his warm eyes anchoring my fraying nerves. "But we must tread lightly. He's got connections that can crush us if we aren't careful." His words rang true. Yet as fear threatened to coil around my heart, I knew I couldn't allow Richard's machinations to deter us from our path to justice. I had witnessed the strength of those around me, the unwavering spirit bending but refusing to break. On the eve of our confrontation, I gazed into the faces of my friends, my neighbors, each one a guardian of untold stories and shared truths, and felt rejuvenated as daring plans and whispered strategies took shape amidst hushed voices late into the night. Finally, the day of the forum arrived, painted in hues of solidarity, each heartbeat amplified in the anxious crowd gathered outside the town hall. My stomach knotted with anticipation. The moment had come to unveil Richard's web of deceit, to demand accountability for the injustices buried under layers of privilege. As I took a deep breath, steeling myself against the lingering shadows of doubt, I climbed the steps to the podium. The air before me shimmered with collective rage and hope, voices woven into an unbreakable bond that shattered the silence. "Today, we reclaim our histories," I proclaimed, feeling the weight of our encouragement surging from the crowd. "Today, we shine light on the deception that Richard Pine and his allies have perpetuated for far too long." As I delivered my speech, every word struck like a hammer against the anvil of injustice, resounding through our entrapped histories. No longer will we allow the echoes of pain to fade into whispers. Every house that stood as a silent witness will speak out. Every hidden truth shall erupt into the open. With each declaration, heads bobbed in agreement, voices rallied in chorus, and anger transformed into an uplifting pulse that promised justice. I called upon Richard's privilege to be questioned, his motives scrutinized, feeling each shout of agreement vibrate in the marrow of my bones. The crowd roared back, and I could almost see Richard squirming, distaste curling his lips as he stood encroaching at the back, his expression a mix of venom and disbelief, a glimpse into the fabric of his unraveling facade. The spiraling energy continued to pulsate as our community converged in force, legalities in hand, a united fortress demanding inquiry. Would this finally be the catalyst needed to dissolve the power plays that had kept us at bay for too long? As I looked down at the sea of familiar faces brimming with newfound hope and strength, I knew we were venturing towards a confrontation that could change everything forever. Would our collective strength be the storm to dismantle the oppression that Richard had woven into the very fabric of our histories?